is episode 72 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by InspectPoint. Today, my guest is Raj Arora, CEO of Jensen Hughes. Obviously, anybody in fire protection knows Jensen Hughes of the large engineering consulting firm. They do a variety of other things in fire protection globally. So they're all over the world. Raj is jet setting all over the place to all his offices, creating great culture, creating a great company at Jensen Hughes. But I wanted to have him on, been wanted to have him on for 5+ years since we started the podcast. He was a mentor of mine back in the day when I worked at Johnson Controls, or we both worked there, and kind of promoted a lot of what Inspect Point and the Fire Protection Podcast has become. So really good to chat with him. Got a nice connection, obviously, there. And he has a great vision of where fire protection is currently at, where we really were at, and where we're going, right? What are the big high risk parts of the industry? Where does artificial intelligence fit in? Where does the synergies of the different sectors of fire protections fit in? So really good to have him on and his perspective on that. So yeah, welcome again, Raj Arora, on the podcast. Raj, what is happening?
Drew Slocum. What is this, 5 years and counting to be on this podcast? Thanks for
Yeah,
having me. I'm really
yeah,
excited.
yeah. I think it was 2019 where I reached out whenever we started it, and I was like, I need to get Raj on, you know.
Yeah, I'm just blown away about your success and your growth. And although it's been a while since we worked together, I've loved staying in touch with you and just sharing our stories.
Well, I mean, you really promoted me to do this. I don't know if you remember having breakfast with me
You
in
say
Manhattan.
that, but can you
Yeah.
remind me of the conversation?
Yeah, we were, I was working for Viking still, and had this idea with Pat, Jen, and Phil upstate, and I had this idea of this business plan and all that. I think you were still working for JCI at the point, I believe, and I'm almost positive. And we were having breakfast. I grabbed you for breakfast in Manhattan, and you were really promoting me to do this. So kudos to you to kind of nudge me out the door a little bit.
Don't tell the JCI people that. Well, it worked.
It worked,
And
right?
and the trends and the tailwinds have been solid around, digital transformation
Yeah.
and private equity and just a
Yep.
changing dynamic. So I'm looking forward to talking to you today about all that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on. Um, you have been a mentor to me over the years, so I definitely want to give you props there.
Thank
Um,
you.
way back, and obviously what we're doing now, and kind of obviously what you're doing now in the space with Jensen Hughes and all that. But how, for people that don't know you, a lot of people listen to this podcast, but you know, how did you get where you're at now? Where did you start? Why fire? Right?
All right. I'll tell you some quick stories. So first of all, I graduated from the University of Maryland in the year 2000. As you know, the University of Maryland has the most premier ABET accredited bachelor's program for fire protection engineering.
Best.
There's some awesome programs at WPI and Cal Poly and Oklahoma State, and some of them are masters only or whatever. So much love to all of those programs. But I went to Maryland. I grew up in Philly. I went to Maryland. My best friend was going to Maryland to run track at a good engineering school. My dad had an engineering business, so I knew one day I was going to make it in there. I started in electrical. I didn't like it. I heard that fire protection was a real specialty and that it was a small program. We're at a big school where I was in Theta Chi fraternity, which is the same fraternity Drew Slocum is in, correct?
Yeah, and actually, Pat Doyle, our CEO. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're
Uh,
all fraternity brothers,
yeah, yeah.
which I just remembered live here during the podcast. I heard it was a small niche program, and I was like, that's good for me because I want to be a specialist, right? Who doesn't want to come out being more valuable? And two, like I could use, a small program.
Yep.
So I went through that. I immediately, through internships and whatever, realized that you're in high demand, right? So all good. I graduated and went into sales and worked for Tyco, which later became JCI, and I was in
Yep.
the ADT business unit.
Yep.
For 2 years, I sold fire alarm systems, like large scale fire alarm systems. I did some project management, I did some of the submittals, and I learned it so deeply, which
Yep.
was the best thing. And I was in the field and everything. Then ADT had bought a company called Security Link, like a residential burglar alarm system
Hmm.
company. They put them together. It was a mess.
Yeah.
So I was like, I got to get out of here. My dad has a company. So I went there, ended up leading that company with my older brother. I have a twin brother that I'll talk about in a second, but an older brother. And we aggressively grew that business as an MEP, but fire protection was a subset of that.
Yep.
And we became real specialists in airports and
Yep.
rail engineering.
Yep.
Then my older brother and I decided it would be better to be brothers than business partners. So family and business can be tricky sometimes. So I somehow, some way, got in front of George Oliver, who is the CEO of Johnson Controls right now, who is the CEO of Tyco, through a gentleman named Bob Chauvin.
Oh,
Um,
I know Bob.
so because I was specifying so many simplex fire alarm systems at these large airports, I knew people at the top in that organization. I got in
Oh,
front of George. I came into the business. I ended up one way or the other leading the fire alarm and detection products business.
yep.
I moved to Switzerland. I then took on special hazards at the same time. It was like $1 billion business. We were doing
Wow.
great. And then Tyco and JCI were going through a merger. So you
Right.
see a trend. And they
Hmm.
were so good to me. I love that company to this day. I
Yep.
have no negative feelings, but I got this opportunity to come into private equity. I came in as the number two person at Jensen Hughes.
Hmm.
There was more than one number two. And then 5 years ago and change, I became the CEO. So that's
Wow.
been my kind of career journey.
Yeah. It's interesting you started in the product side and and
Well, I started off in system integration,
right.
then consulting, then product
Product
manufacturing, then back to
back to
consulting.
consulting. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the product side, if you can know the product, and I have a similar story where just knowing the product, it's a lot easier to, I don't know. The consulting side is definitely a big piece, but if you know both, if you know the product, it really, I feel like it really gives you an advantage. So,
Yeah, for
personal
sure. I
opinion.
mean, look, all the experiences were great. The small business, the ADT experience was like being on the front line with customers, deploying solutions, etc. The family business was like, all right, roll up your sleeves and get it done. Assemble furniture the night before people start.
Yeah,
Like, go get paid. Bring in the work, do the work,
yeah,
get paid, whatever. Which is kind of like a small Jensen Hughes office today. So
yep,
I could
yeah,
be able to relate.
yeah,
The Tyco experience was big company, learn about classical strategy, process, corporate functions, and now Jensen Hughes is like all those worlds combined,
yeah.
which has been helpful.
Now, I remember back in when you had the office furniture in Newark, New Jersey, way back, uh, right off the train stop there.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So, so obviously 5 years in, private partnered with Jensen Hughes, and then obviously private equity involved there. What is how is that landscape? I was involved in a lot of the specification on the product side. So talking to fire protection engineers, MEP engineers, how what has changed, and this is more from my thoughts as well, or just I want to know about it, is how has the consulting side changed over the last 5 to 10 years?
In like the industry or at Jensen Hughes?
Yeah, I guess the industry, and then obviously specific to Jensen Hughes. I see you guys you're partnering all over the world. You're traveling everywhere, so it's kind of fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing is that there's just new threats and hazards that are emerging every day.
Yep.
Um, and there's adjacent services that we have that converge onto fire.
Yep.
So the lines have been blurred a little bit. Uh, wildfires weren't a thing back then,
Right.
10 years ago. Energy storage and the, lithium ion batteries weren't a thing. Small modular nuclear reactors weren't a thing. So
Yep.
there's all these different threats and hazards that we as Jensen Hughes have the privilege of leading the forefront on, whether it's just thought leadership, innovation, codes and standards development. There's been more digital tools along the way, and I think we're going to see a huge acceleration in that.
Mm.
But more digital tools that enter into what we call tech enabled services. We
Mm-hmm.
actually, 10% of our revenue has some sort of digital product that is a Jensen Hughes product that we use to either do the work or we sell it on to our clients. That
Yep.
has changed quite a bit. And, like emergency management and forensics and security
Yep.
are all convert testing and inspection. All of them are converging on the consulting space.
Yep.
So it's not your typical like, hey, like, does this meet code? Or what's the sprinkler design? Or can you do some modeling? There's all sorts of threads in the work that we do right now and considerations.
Yeah, I mean, your client has bigger needs and they just don't want that design. They want a whole package, and providing them those solutions only helps them
Yeah,
out at the end of the day, right?
yeah, absolutely. I think the business models have changed as well. I mean, it's not just, hey, bill by the hour, right? There's just so many different ways that we price and deliver our work, and we charge subscriptions. Sometimes we do retainers, we do fixed price projects, we do time and material. I mean, that is all evolving over time. And something else that has evolved over time is how we specify. I mean, I remember growing up in a household where my father had this business and he had binders on the shelves, and they would specify very specific products
Yeah.
for projects. And I would say that's very rare these days, unless you're modifying an existing building that has like a fire alarm and detection product and you're
Yep.
extending it. Besides that, it's very vanilla,
Hmm.
and we allow multiple manufacturers to compete
Yep.
based on performance specs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the proprietariness of the industry is, I see it on the test and spec side, and you want to be able to do everything, and getting, you know, locked into one product. Yeah, I understand why they did that over time, but the market seems to be moving away from it, even in the fire alarm aspect. So,
Yeah, and contracting, it would normally be design, bid, build, right? And then we would
yep.
represent the owner on the design team or represent the owner, and there's a contracting team. Obviously, with design build contracting methods or integrated project delivery, you know, around the world, we find ourselves teaming more with builders and contractors on our work.
Yep. Yep. Um, on the M&A front, and it's funny, I talked to obviously there's a lot of M&A in the contracting space. There is some in the software space. There's some in your engineering and kind of consulting space. Even my buddy who's a dentist, there's dentist private equity firms that are
It's
just
everywhere.
rolling up dentists. Yeah, it's everywhere. Um, and I don't think it's stopping either. Um, what's any outlook there? I mean, from the Jensen Hughes side of thing, I know you guys are doing pretty well in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, so we're a combination. Jensen Hughes is effectively a combination of 3 dozen companies over the course of history.
Yep.
Um, we're integrated culturally and process wise, and that's an easy thing to say, but a hard thing to execute.
Yeah.
And we've been on a really special journey to improve our culture. And I sit here today, and our attrition is the lowest it's ever been in
It's great.
the history of the company, and people are aligned to our purpose and our principles, as we call it. So, all good. That being said, we are still highly acquisitive, right? And there are so many. The special thing is like, we do very little buy side origination.
Hmm.
People are just coming to us and asking us, are you, would we be a good fit for you? So our
Wow.
pipeline is huge. Yeah, I
Wow.
mean, we go and, have half a dozen speakers at the annual SFPE conference around the world, and people just come up to us afterwards and saying, "Hey,
Wow.
well, how do I become a part of Jensen Hughes?"
Yeah.
So that's great. But this is not about that. This question is not solely about Jensen Hughes. I think private equity investment is here to stay. There was a little bit of a slowdown on deal activity because of high interest rates. I
Right.
think that's going to soften up or loosen up in 25 and 26. I think anytime you have an industry, whether it's a dental office practice or engineering services or a fire alarm integration firm,
Hmm.
I think anytime you have a distributed model and you're able to put pieces together and consolidate the back end and the systems and drive synergies, whether it's on the cost or revenue side for the business, it's compelling, right?
Right. Right.
It's like, why shouldn't you be able to do that? And private equity firms have done a really nice job creating value that way.
Yeah.
There are certainly risks and pitfalls to a fast-paced private equity
Yep.
ownership, but that depends on the fund,
Yep.
right? And how thoughtful they are and how much they understand the business, et cetera. But to answer your question, I think it's here to stay. And I think for those who are looking for, an exit strategy for their business or an ownership transition, it's a really cool option. And
Yeah.
it's not for everybody. There are people that are going to be listening to this who are like, get a negative reaction to this part of the conversation, and that's okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
not for everybody.
Yeah. There's pros and cons, and certain personalities and uh, fit it, and certain ones don't. And
Yeah.
there's opportunity on the other side as well, right? If you have a strong business and um, are going to stay in it for the next 20 years, I think there's opportunity, but there's also heartache with that too. So, um, you know, fire protection, and I guess that's why private equity really is gravitated toward the industry. Is it? I don't know who coined the term, but I say it a lot. It's codified industry, right? It's it's tied to life safety. It's not like air conditioning and plumbing and maybe a little electrical, but there's a code behind it on the life safety aspect, but also moving through it, right? The maintenance of the systems,
Sure.
and obviously we've gravitated toward that and heavily
I mean,
codified.
look,
And yeah,
this, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
yeah,
but
go for it.
the industry, whether you're a product manufacturer or system integrator, contractor, or consultant like me, it's a highly regulated industry,
Hmm.
which makes it largely recession resistant because things have to get done. It is I would say, a small ticket price for a huge cost of failure.
Yep.
So it's like you want to go with the best people because if you get it wrong, like the consequences are so great. And it's defensible growth. Like you're never going to have a year where you decline materially or decline at all, even in the worst economic
Right.
conditions, right?
Right.
So it's like, and these new threats and hazards are coming in, and there's recurring revenue. So these are all the boxes that certain private equity funds are looking to check, and they're like,
Yep.
sign me up. And
Yeah.
so it's not, I think you're going to see a lot of capital being deployed if people want it,
Right.
right?
Yeah. That's interesting. One, you hit on this earlier is, the different, we've got wildfires, we got lithium ion battery. I know, talked a lot about those and the industry does, but you mentioned the nuclear side and it seems, I know here in Connecticut, they're starting up the old nuclear plant again, um, Millstone, because of I think just some failures with renewables and just bad deal, whatever. Anyway, nuclear's, and that's highly, highly regulated, right? If you think fire protection is regulated,
Yeah.
nuclear is even worse. So is that a real thing, or is that just like a, you know, flash in the pan the next few years we see it, or is that going to be a thing moving
Well,
forward?
I personally think it's a real thing. There's no way you can achieve decarbonization goals
Right.
or meet the power requirements for AI, for example, without nuclear being in the equation.
Yep.
It is safer and cleaner than any other form of energy. It just, the perception sometimes on its safety is not matched with reality. It is more expensive, but it's highly, highly reliable.
Yep.
So we are, if you asked me 5 years ago, I felt like that market was really challenged, right? Because of various things, the cost profile of it, some like what happened in Fukushima.
Yep.
But now, um, with the move for sustainability and green technologies, and now AI, it's here to stay. I mean, 3 Mile Island is being re-energized
Oh, wow.
for Microsoft. If you read
Wow.
the headlines, and that's Constellation, and um, Amazon is partnering with Dominion in Virginia to invest. I think it's 500 million in new small modular reactors. Google's doing the same. I think it's, and then the core fleet that's in existence today has gotten some really nice tax credits
Yep.
through the government stimulus, the IIJA and the IRA, to, you know, operate more effectively and to invest more. So I think it's here to stay. It's a
It's good to
great
hear.
part of our business, and our team is really doing well in that regard.
Yeah, I know it's super niche and that and obviously that's great. There's growth there because I didn't know those were being spun up, but tech it does make sense. I know even like people that were at SpaceX and other firms are they're after this Department of Energy kind of grant that is coming due, and yeah, there's a lot of money and eyes on it. So that's a great thing. Um, so with that, all right, we've got these three kind of hazards that we're dealing with in the industry, but just over, all of the landscape of fire protection, from the manufacturer side, where the associations and NFPA and UL and everybody's sitting, we have obviously the engineering consulting side where you sit and the HJs. Where I guess it's a tough question, but what's going to happen over the next 10 years? What does 10 years down the road look like? Are any of these talking more? So it seems like they're kind of secular, right? Um, in the
Yeah,
space at least.
they've been talking about convergence of different pieces of the value chain for, we've been talking about that for a long time. I don't think that's, I don't think you're going to see manufacturers start acquiring integrators who start acquiring consultants, et
Right.
cetera. I mean, I think the teaming and the project teams will be similar. Look, it all gets down to digitalization and the impact of artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
Um, and there's pros and cons to AI, and there's a some people will be early adopters and some people won't, but you cannot deny the fact that that is going to have an impact in everything we do in our life, and our industry is going to be no different,
Yep.
right? So I think the way we consume codes is going to be different,
Yep.
right? And through these AI tools, um, I think the way we share information and the way we analyze a building through digital twins is going to be completely different. So
Yep.
if you just ask me what's going to happen, it's just digitalization and the impact of artificial intelligence and technology on an industry that is not the most future focused industry, and an industry that is quite risk averse.
Yeah.
Um, it may lag financial services or something like that, but it's going to have an impact over the next 5 years or so. I mean, yesterday, Jensen Hughes just launched our own internal generative AI tool, which is super cool. And we've
Yeah.
taken all of our data internally, and you can just ask the tool questions around, hey, I'm looking for a fire alarm expert to help me on an airport in Texas, and I'll just
Yeah.
pull up through the resumes and the CRM data, like who can be a good fit.
Sure.
It's just going to change the game and drive massive productivity gains.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see it, especially with all of the data being collected right now. And I
And it's
mean,
all about how clean and the quality of your data. I
yes,
mean, you
it
put
is.
garbage into a system like that, that's what you're getting out of it.
Oh, I know. And I know NFPA is trying to get their head around, or they have in the past tried to get their head around of like standardizing some of the data, and it hasn't gotten there, right? And I think again, I don't want to call it a failure, but there's no standardization there. So without that, it's going to be a mess to put that together, um, to make better decision on code. But yeah, AI might be able to help it, but without that standardization, it's going to be really tough.
So, Drew, if you look 10 years into the future, I know you'll be on your yacht at that time, but what, what do you see?
You're not going to be on your yacht. We'll meet on yachts, you know? I don't know. Um, I'm not f- I think that the AI side on the code is really going to develop. I think on the code side and NFPA and UL and the European standards and all that, that's already being done, right? I think that'll be a big step up. I think getting some of that data into the authorities having jurisdiction, the fire marshals, I think there's a little bit of a gap there in knowledge base for the code. So I think that will help accelerate there. Um, there's really cool tools on the digitization side of the HJs. Um, a couple podcasts ago, I had First Do on, which is a big software that kind of takes all EMS and fire together, right? And
Okay.
reining all that in, with all these different modules, PE backed, high growth, putting some great solutions out there and standardizing the data. Um, and kind of what they're doing, virtual inspections. Anyway, I think AHJs and the code coming better together, that will happen probably not 10 years, probably 5 years from now. Um, you know, I think there'll be some more IoT stuff out there. Again, that's slow. That's a slow go. Um, I wish it would be faster, but our industry's slow, so it's like, I hope I hope in 10 years we're not kicking ourselves that we should have been farther along. Um, but the industry's
Well,
slow,
we is
so
a big word. Some of us are going to go fast, and some of us will go slow. And
it's true.
I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I'm wondering when the insurers get into the market a little bit more. Um, there's all this data out there on on building health and all that. When does that end up hitting the insurer market? Because that's already, premiums are probably at an
I think
all-time
that's a
high.
huge question because
Yeah,
that industry is probably equally as slow and
yeah,
process oriented and risk averse than our
yeah.
industry. But think about all that data that exists out there to help intelligent underwriting, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've always scratched my head ever since starting Inspect Point. I'm like, man, the insurers, how are they not involved in some of this data? But again, I think that'll, you know, the insurance industry is probably ripe for a little bit of a change, with just incredible premiums, people not getting covered. So I don't know. I don't know where we end up. But I hope the insurers are more actively involved in the fire industry. Um, Last question for you. What is it like having an identical twin brother?
It's a great question. I love it. Uh, net, it's been an amazing experience. There was a couple of years in high school where I think we were too close for comfort and maybe had a crush on the same girl and got annoyed at each other. But I'll tell you what, we kind of were always together.
Yeah.
We always played together. We made each other better athletes growing up. We shared everything, right? So I think like naturally as a person, I share a lot because I was just used to sharing things with my twin brother.
Yeah.
But really, we talk to each other almost every day. I call him on my way to work around 7 a.m., but we kind of mentor each other business wise. So we share
Wow.
kind of what's going on, the good or the bad, and he does the same. And we kind of just give each other perspective and talk for 20, 30 minutes in the morning, my morning. He lives in Switzerland, so his
Wow.
afternoon. And yeah, it's a super cool experience that I wish everybody had a chance to experience on their own, and I know they don't, but I love it.
Well, I don't know if you do this. I have we have identical 6-year-old boys. Um,
I actually forgot that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, hopefully you're thanking your parents, you know, all the time or have growing up and because early on it's a lot, but it is really cool to see how they've interacted and they're like the best friends. They're their best friends. So, um,
exactly. Just keep it up.
yeah.
Keep it up with them.
Well, with that,
Don't dress them in the exact same
oh, we don't.
shirt, but make sure like I always wore red and he wore blue and it was the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't put them in identical rugby shirts in different colors.
One day in kindergarten, they flipped clothes or flipped a shirt, flipped a coat. I forgot, and it sent everybody uh, in their classrooms for it was like, man, they're starting this in kindergarten. Um, well, Raj, this has been awesome. I know it's been a long time coming, and look forward to seeing you hopefully in person
I'll
here
try and
soon.
get you some views on this thing, Drew.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, yeah. We're gonna get this out, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and
Yeah,
the
I had a
podcast is kind
blast.
of
We could go on forever, but we don't want to bore the audience with a long
exactly.
video.
Uh, where can we find Jensen Hughes? What's the URL?
www.jensenhughes.com, or you just type Jensen Hughes in LinkedIn. We put a lot of stuff on there. Those are the
Cool.
best two ways.
Raj, thanks for chatting today. And you know, one of the topics that I had my mind. I had been involved in kind of the engineering and consulting side of fire protection, a little bit from more on the product side and getting specifications. But what what is the difference between, working on big projects in New York City, there was fire protection consultants, and then there was fire protection engineering slash design. What is
Yeah.
where do you guys see yourself?
Well, thanks for asking that. We are best known for our efforts on performance based design, or what they call code consulting, right? So we'll get on if it's a new construction project, we'll work with the architect and the owner to make sure that all the special things that they want to do in the building get achieved, whether
Yep.
that fits cleanly into the code or whether it needs to defy the code or be modified. We support it with engineering analysis, and we work with the authority having jurisdiction to make sure everybody's comfortable.
Yep.
Now, on that same project, you have your traditional design elements, your fire alarm, your sprinkler, your special hazards, whatever it may be for that particular building type. We sometimes, when the application is sophisticated and requires that level of expertise, we'll perform that work. Um, Often we let the MEPs take the work as part of their package, or
Yep.
sometimes it's even done by the system integrator.
Sure.
What you can expect from Jensen Hughes moving forward is a stronger push on doing more of that design work, because what we have experienced is that when the MEPs or the system integrators are doing it, there's oftentimes we're being pulled in because there was some sort of it could be an error, there could be some sort of misunderstanding,
Sure.
and the design is not being accepted by the authority having jurisdiction.
Yep.
So more and more clients are asking us to saying, "Hey, can you participate and do the scope of the design work?"
Yep.
So for those who are out there and have experienced that, know that Jensen Hughes, whether it's on the bid drawings or the shop drawings for these systems, are going to accelerate our business in that regard and be
Yeah.
price competitive.
Yeah, I can see that helping out tremendously. I was involved in some of the design at Moynihan Station, the new Penn Station in New York, and there was a code consultant involved, and there was an MEP, and both were great companies, but it just seemed they were disconnected and
Yeah.
didn't help
There's a
out the poor.
disconnection,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's unqualified people that are not FPEs,
Yep.
like an HVAC and plumbing
Yep.
person doing the sprinkler.
Yep.
You have the lighting and power person doing the fire alarm. They're not connected. Smoke control is a different animal. It's just more and more people want that interlock between the systems design and the code consulting. And we have tremendous experience and thought leadership. And we actually, participate on the NFPA codes for since
Right.
their inception on these areas. So we're gonna serve the market more in that regard.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Yeah, I've questioned that for a while, just involved in the some of the design and consulting aspects and some bigger projects in New York. So, wanted to get your take on it. Well, appreciate it again, and thanks a lot.
All right, take care.
All right, see ya. This has been episode 72 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by Inspect Point. I want to thank Raj Arora again from Jensen Hughes, coming on the podcast and talking everything fire protection at a very high level, and even getting into the weeds a little bit on some design consulting projects that we were on back in the day. So again, thanks for the listening to the podcast, and see you again soon.